Call the meeting to order. Start with the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance
Pledge
to the flag
flag
of
of
the
the
United
United
States of
States of
America,
America, to the republic
which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everybody. We'll start with the most important part of the meeting, Winter Scholar Athlete Recognition.
Yeah, so we have a crowd here of some of our student athletes. We do actually have other athletes who couldn't be here tonight because they have a track meet, so they will actually be recognized at the next meeting. But at the end of each sports season, the New York State Public High School Athletic Association recognizes students, both teams and individual students who excel in the classroom as well as athletically. So throughout the year, we like to just make sure that we recognize them here in public for their academic and athletic successes. In order to receive the team award, the team's average GPA must be greater than or equal to 90.00. And that is the same for an individual to be recognized. They must also have a GPA of 90.00. So these are students who have a very busy schedule with all of their athletic practices and competitions and manage to also maintain a high GPA in their classes. So congratulations to the students. Here tonight, we have first up McKenna Frieswick, our basketball. We also have Lydia Kasak. Lily Kozera, but she was supposed to be here, but I don't see her. We have Brody Augusta. We have Preston today. Kellen Knittel. And Jake Zimidowski, who is also not here. So congratulations to the scholar athletes who are here and those who are named but could not be here. And like I said, we did have our track teams that qualified at both as teams and individuals. So we will be honoring them at next meeting, but they do deserve to be recognized. So congratulations to everybody.
From our standpoint, couldn't be more proud of you guys. I mean, when you walk on the field, wherever it is, you're representing yourselves, of course, your family, but you're representing the school district. And all we ever do is get great feedback from other schools, other principals. We get just the fact that you maintain such excellent grades and still participate at high levels. That's fantastic. And we wanted to take the chance to say thank you. Thank you for the way you perform. Thank you for the way you act. And thank you for representing us. So very good.
Dr. Watkins. She's gonna take the student athletes. If you want to just go together as a group, she's gonna take your picture.
And make the smile.
And Kellen, I saw your certificates. But I was handing it to you, so we'll get you a new one. Oh, wait, do you want to take it for the picture though, bud? And then we'll get you in. Thank you. Congrats.
Wait for me to come back.
No, I think we're good.
Okay. Next is the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve? Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Comments, questions, concerns?
Did you have a question? No, my comment is the school starts on the 8th, which is later than I think most years, right?
Correct. Yeah, it's due to Labor Day.
Labor Day.
Was that your only question on me? Okay, I had a question as well. So, just so the public realizes, I'm sure when they see this, so this year we had 5 5 snow days built into the school calendar. And so now it's going to be 4, and then after that would be remote. So does that mean there would not be, the remote takes the place of any payback days?
Get back.
Get back.
So it's kind of a really tricky scheduling year. So when we make the school schedule, we have to schedule 180 school days plus 4 days for staff between Labor Day and Regents Rating Day. And so with Labor Day being late and Regents Rating Day not moving, at the end of the school year, we have a really packed time. So we try to get families to have their vacations and whatnot throughout the school year. And so building in any more days than that would really kind of make the calendar next to impossible. So we're hoping that we don't need to use them, but
Would, if we went remote, would it be synchronous learning? Okay.
Yeah, so just to be clear, that remote learning is required in order for it to count by New York State, it needs to be synchronous learning at this point. It
Okay.
was a little bit different during COVID. And none of this is, the way we want our students to learn, we want them
Right.
here with us. But these are the challenges that we're facing, and we also have, though I think it's wonderful that we're recognizing more cultural holidays, it is really challenging to add holidays and remain with the requirements of 180 school days, because they're taking up time when we're trying to schedule days, right? So the more holidays they add, I think it's great, but it does make scheduling way more challenging each year.
Thank you. And I did have a question on number 5, just a general question. I don't think it's, and it needs to go into exec, you can. The substitute list, I see they're broken down by certified and non-certified. But then mine's not opening. There's some leave on a few of them. Where it says short-term subbing, are those leave replacements?
So leave replacements
Or
are more than a semester. Somebody who's doing a short-term leave is considered a short-term sub, not a leave replacement by law, but yes, I think that is what they're commonly called.
Okay. So for that, I was just wondering why there's no designation for this short-term subbing, whether they're certified or not, because they're gonna be one of those categories, right?
Right?
I was just out of curiosity.
And I think they are all certified or they wouldn't be in those positions. We would go for them first, the certified personnel
That's
first
what I was
for a
assuming.
lengthier, subdivision.
All right. Thank you.
Mhm.
Anything else? Okay. All in favor? Aye. Any against? Okay. All right, next is President and Vice President's reports. First, and I promised myself I won't take away any thunder, but I just wanted to say thank you to Jack Gilroy on this. I went to the Art Safe Schools through Project Adam. It was just great to see the commitment of all of our schools to that program. I'll leave it at that, but thank you, Jack. That was a great job. Second, don't forget the BOCES meeting at, I think it's 5 o'clock on the 28th. It's like, a 5-minute, 10-minute meeting. But we need to vote at the same time all the other schools in Dutchess County vote. Don't forget the budget vote on the 19th, middle school band room. The 2026 BOCES Distinguished Graduate Breakfast on May 21st at 9 a.m. Chris, but if there's anyone else that would like to attend, same thing with the Dutchess County School Board Association, the annual meeting on June 4th. any board members or from any school are welcome to attend. And then June 12th, graduation's early this year, so don't forget. And the other thing is, if you have a chance, take a look, refresh yourself on what's in that shared drive. It's not just the future meeting IDs, but it's a lot of other information that's important to us about things that we need to get started on, things that should be done. So if you have a chance, take a look at that. Other than that, I don't have anything else to report. Chris?
You covered the whole list, Barry.
All right, student members reports.
Right. Hi, good evening, everyone. The high school has many exciting events throughout the third quarter. The band and chorus attended Busch Gardens, where they stayed overnight. They competed on Friday and again on Saturday morning, and where they attended in the amusement park. The band received first place and the chorus received second place awards. Spring student athletes are just beginning their season and are working very hard. The DCC bio students attended the Cold Spring Harbor Lab, where they actually completed a lab with advanced technology. Students are also preparing for upcoming APs as we approach the end of the school year. Students are very excited for prom, which is coming up this Friday. Also, the college and career fair is happening on the 23rd, as well as having many students volunteer for the 27th for the wellness fair. And we'll be having more than 75 representatives attending. Overall, students are very happy and prepared to get through the final stretch of the year. Thank you.
Questions? You sure you're happy about the end of the year? I mean.
Yes.
Spoken like a true senior over there.
Yeah, it's been rough. It's been rough.
There you go. Thank you, guys. All right, Dean of Students.
Thank you. So I'm going to be going through some of the slides. Again, I'll try and be mindful of your time. I know there's some other pressing matters as well this evening. So the first slide there in regards to Project Adam, thank you, Dr. Hartwig, for attending today. All buildings across the entire district earlier today have been recognized as Project Adam Heart Safe Schools. So what this means is that our 4 buildings have met the criteria. We essentially have been audited by this company, Project Adam, that is sort of checking to see, do we as a school do all the right things? Should there ever be an instance in which there's a cardiac arrest? We've checked all the boxes, we meet it, we went above and beyond and all those things. So a credit to the school nurses in each building, the safety teams, the building principals, everybody that's kind of involved. And what really stands out to me and why I took so much passion to this, and I think that Ms. Hernandez can as well, is it speaks to the safety and something that is so important to us, not just for the students, but the staff as well, and then also the entire district. So even if there's ever, something that happens after school, we have all of the right protocols in place to make sure, should there ever be a cardiac arrest, we are able to save that life within minutes. So thank you for attending today and for appreciating that. And I just a lot of credit to everybody that was involved across the entire district to make this happen. At the high school level, we do have AP exams coming up. So there is a schedule there that I've provided for you, so you can start to take a little bit of a look. We have some of the students are well underway in their review sessions, and this also is taking place at the middle school. So on the next slide there, CBT, computer-based testing exams, will begin actually tomorrow for science students. And then ELA is April 29th and 30th, and math is May 6th and 7th. So we are fully ready for these to kind of kick off. And one thing that we're really excited about too is down at Alden Place, we've actually begun having our students down there review the tools on how they can kind of prepare for these computer-based testing exams that they're really going to pick up and running with here at the middle school as well. So that's been exciting as well. Speaking to the MTSS system that we have on the next slide there, this is something that has really been successful this year, and something that I've been very passionate about working alongside a number of great people on the teams at the middle school and high school, from the counselors to the building principals to some of the teachers that give up their time as well. So the MTSS team meets bi-weekly to review and analyze our student data. I've been trying to come to these meetings each time and give you some data just to put it into your mind and see what we're doing with our students. So for the sake of MTSS, it was a little niche to get certain student data because it does require certain grades and test scores and Lexile levels and all that stuff. So I didn't want to provide necessarily all of that information. I'm going to speak to the two boxes that I have in the top right-hand corner that jumped out to me as I started getting this information ready to present. I do also want to be mindful. I cannot fully produce the Q3 because grades are due tonight for teachers at midnight. So it wouldn't have been able to be a full circle. So that's where I spoke to Q2. So in the middle school, at the progress report, we had 25 students failing. At the end of the quarter, we had 11 students failing. That is a 56% reduction in students failing for the quarter, or failing a class. And now from the high school level, we had 59 students failing at the progress report. And at the end of Q2, we had 34, which is a 42% reduction. So what that said to me as I'm analyzing this data is that our MTSS system is working. Now, obviously, we also need to look at this data and be like, how can we even prevent that from happening in the first place, letting these numbers get so high? But what I realize is some of these systems of support, so like that yellow box that we have there, many of those students received a travel sheet. So what that looks like is any of these students failing, I've met with them, we create a plan, we go through, and then that allows them to kind of carry on their way and try and pick it up for the rest of the quarter. So this is something I was really proud of, and in working with the other building principals and the MTSS team, I think everybody's really proud of that. When we do address these students who are struggling and we put systems of support in place for them, they're able to pick it up and keep it going. Now, these are supports, so we do try to pull them away so they don't become dependent on them all the time as well. Otherwise, these students aren't necessarily going to grow independently. So it's kind of a give and take that we're working with some of these students. You know, they get to the passing grades, and then we're going to remove that system of support sometimes, and hopefully that they can then just kind of get to the passing grades without all the supports that we are providing. As we move to the restorative pieces, because this does connect to as well. Last time I was here, I spoke to you about the alternative to suspension that I had attended the conference up in Boston with Mr. Cabello. Last week, myself, Mr. Cabello, and Mr. Seib had a faculty meeting in which we were able to present the secondary level teachers with the same thing that I had presented you guys so that we were all on the same page. We had highlighted some of the restorative practices that many of our teachers are already currently using. And then we also introduced some additional pieces that I had shared to you at the board meeting, and that hopefully the staff is going to be able to adopt and be able to begin to use some of these things. One of the things that we really highlighted in this faculty meeting was the why and why restorative practices work. Rather than just explaining to them this is what we are going to do, because many of these teachers are already using restorative practices. They just don't even quite realize that they're doing it day in and day out. And what that kind of revolved around was that the student support and the accountability is what we're really looking to, connect with them on and try and help them, as they begin to move on to the next level, wherever that may be. This position as the Dean of Students now for the middle school and high school has been really successful, I feel like, in allowing me to see the culture between both buildings. Right there is good, Mr. Garcia, thank you. So seeing that we are in a digital age, cell phones aren't going anywhere, and seeing how the middle school works hand in hand with the high school and students are transitioning from one building to another, this particular position has allowed me, I think, to help kind of build this culture that is transparent through both buildings. And that restorative piece, I think, ties it the bow there, because we have so many amazing things happening in these buildings, and we are starting to shift towards this, growth focused culture. And we are building a consistent approach that is, hopefully going to incorporate teacher feedback and guide the work that we are doing day in and day out. And so this role, I think, has been really key in that. And then finally being able to connect with the teachers, after having connected with you guys, has been huge. And the feedback is the piece that I wanted to get from our teachers to see, are they really in support of this? Because it's one thing to share this idea with you guys, but are our teachers also going to buy into it? This idea of restorative practices that I think are really going to be beneficial for our students here. So I share with you some of the feedback that we have gotten from our faculty members after the meeting. I had presented them a Google form, and honestly, I was really thrilled to see that it was a majority, just all really positive. Staff thought that the presentation that we had done was effective. They were quite engaged with some of the new pieces that they were learning about, from the structured day to the tag out, timeout, takeout method, the reflection rooms and the accountability projects, all those things that we had talked about, our staff really took a liking to. And then also they were saying that, cool, yeah, we want to start doing this. We would like to start piloting some of these things, but we also want to start learning more about how we can do it and what that's going to look like too. So this was a great piece, so that, Mr. Cabello, Mr. Sight, myself also have a good understanding of how we can work with the teachers in each building to, again, tie that bow so that this restorative practice that we are talking about as students come here at the 6th grade level and they, get all the way to 12th grade. It's something that we do. We work with our kids, whether it's in their academics, for multi-MTSS systems, or if it's any sort of disciplinarian stuff that happens in our building, we're working with them and not just trying to, be the, big fist and lay it down. So, overall, it's been a great third quarter as well. And, just to tie up with what Kimora said, our 8th graders just got back from Washington, D.C. last week, which was again, another successful trip. And thank you to MEF for making that possible for many of our students as well. But overall, the culture here and everything has been, really positive.
Questions?
You, go ahead.
Can you give an example of a restorative practice? Because when you speak about it, it seems like if it's some, like a major event, especially for the disciplinary sense, like, somebody, not really an extreme example, like somebody had a weapon or somebody was really acting out in class, but does that also cover maybe lower level infractions or disciplinary issues from Elm Drive through the high school? And maybe you can give an example as to what that might look like?
Yeah, well, so I can speak specifically for 6 through 12 because I'm only 6 through 12. And any infraction, so, you speak to something like that, that's really serious. That is where we still have our code of conduct and things, if it's that serious, then we have to take protocols that are that serious, that match that kind of infraction. But we don't have necessarily that step in our current code of conduct where, after the 3rd time a student has a cell phone infraction, it's a detention automatically. Or, a student is late to class 3 times, automatic detention. So the, restorative, or there are certain instances that I'm thinking of specifically, especially in the middle school building, that have happened where a student receives in-school suspension when there maybe what structured day would have been really a beneficial piece for that.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
And is it only the teachers that were administrating, or is it other supportive staff as well?
Just the teachers for 6 through 12.
Okay.
Yep.
And I was thinking just because maybe the elementary schools, they have.
We'll get there. That's the goal. We'll get there.
And then I was kind of surprised to see, I think the rate of recidivism for those who are failing is wonderful, obviously the decrease in that, but the 59 is quite a bit. That's like a quarter of the high school population almost. And do we have a reason or reasons as to why that is? And what is failing? Is it like below 65?
Mhm, correct.
You can explain more about failing as to why that's so high?
65, correct. And I mean, I can use some, judgment onto why I think that that might be the case. And sometimes I know certain teachers, and I'm not saying that it's correct, but they think by potentially maybe having a student who's on the border there, failing them for the quarter is gonna light a fire under them and maybe get them to, try and pick it up a little bit. I think some students also, it's just the nature of it. The quarter one ended and they start to slack off again and they're like not taking it so serious. And then, the progress report comes out at 5 weeks and they see their grades and they're like, oh shoot, I need to get myself back together. And then they start scrambling at the back end of the quarter and we call parents in and we have meetings with some of these students. And I also think some of the nature of it too is some of the students, again, this is quarter two. And I present to you at the end of the year and I have some of the other data that for quarter three. I think it'll be a little interesting to compare because it's still very early in the school year, relatively speaking, for quarter two. So some of these students were in certain classes that maybe they did not end up taking for, or that they thought they were going to really succeed in and didn't. But overall, I think that it is just sometimes a, mentality thing for a teacher to light a fire under a student and hopefully, get them across that line.
And I'm sorry, and for the failing, that's across all subjects. That's not just like one class that maybe they're not.
No, this is just for one class. That's just one section.
Okay.
So if you're failing ELA and that's it,
Okay,
that's,
okay.
yeah.
And do we know like the majority of them is one class? Is it spread amongst different classes? Is it one specific grade?
I mean, it's different, like as we receive the breakdown, it's, there are some classes that are a little bit more heavy than other classes, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily one specific class that is dominating the, percentage of failures.
So are the students aware day by day of their status, like that, they're failing or they're struggling? I mean, are they aware so that like we're not talking about getting the week 4 and all of a sudden they get this, hey, you're failing and it's like, oh my God, I didn't think I was failing. Or is it, they've got their grades, they've got their running average.
They have it.
Okay.
They have it.
Students, true?
Yeah, school tool, they can check every day.
Very good.
I didn't, there was just an additional question and maybe think about Perry. It was either a newsletter, maybe March or April from Mr. Sipe that said school tool was going to be down for some time. And I, as a parent, really didn't go on that often during that time and it wasn't really sure what for some time. And so do you know if it's Elliot, I don't know who this is geared toward, Elliot, Amy, if that for some time was lengthy?
I believe, I'd have to go back to his email, but I believe it was about 4 weeks. And what it required was school tool was updating the calculation from letter to numerical grades.
Okay.
And so in order for that calculation to happen without the students losing their data, they had to close it so that they could do what they were doing in the background and then reopen it. So everything was still calculating. And I believe in that memo that Mr. Sipe sent home, he alerted parents of that so that they could talk to their teacher to get an update at any time they needed it.
He did say that.
Yeah. And same with students.
Right, he did say that. I really do like the mention of, all along, I've thought our district is in a growth mindset, so, but in terms of being a little bit more proactive. So, yes, I do know parents can reach out at any time, students can reach out at any time. But are teachers alerting parents or students if a given student is starting to fail?
Yeah.
You don't have to answer that at this, I mean, we don't have teachers in the room, so, I know you are a teacher, but in this
Yeah.
role as dean of students, you don't have to speak for them, but,
And
I
having,
don't know.
being a teacher
Right.
as well, I can tell you that, and having now worked in both buildings, at the secondary level, in our faculty meetings and stuff, both principals along with the administration really encourages and pushes and incentivizes teachers, like, make sure if a student is going to be failing and you're going to be putting that down, you better make sure that you have contacted the parents and you have that sort of, receipts to show them, and that, you better CC me on these emails as well. Like, you cannot just fail a student without having contact home. So that is something I will say that both building principals have really pushed for. So, and working in both buildings, I can vouch for that.
and what is a travel sheet? Oh, should you
Did
have?
you have something?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I
No
didn't
problem, no, you're good.
See you down there.
Just to like add from the perspective as a student and not just a board member here, is that you have multiple outlets to reach out about your grades, whether you can get into school tour or not. Teachers are very good at reaching out, like Mr. Groy said, about if you're endangered of failing. But it's also like, as you're getting older, as someone who's in 12th grade and someone who's in 11th grade, you have to take on more of that responsibility of being in charge of your own grades. Like for me personally, like I don't even know if my parents can even get into school tour. So that's always been my responsibility of doing so. And there's so many outlets of so many different periods you can come. Like if you are willing to put in the work to try and change your grades, teachers will also work with you at the end of the day. Yes, I understand that, sometimes it can just be really hard for students and they're really trying. But yet again, at the end of the day, for majority of the times, looking at it from my own personal experience of talking to my peers about those that were endangered of failing their grades, a lot of it has to do with not taking on that responsibility and always blaming it. Like, if this is important to you, you'll find a way to get it done. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, what's a travel sheet?
Yeah, so this is something that we use, if a student is failing, we provide them a sheet of paper that we have, kind of customized up, that has some different things on it, and they can bring it with them from one class to another, provide it to the teacher, and they can mark off, there's, a bunch of different things that they fill out and circle, and any assignments that they may be missing, they can mark it down on that. So when the student then comes at the end of the day, they look at it and they can be like, okay, this is the work that I need to get done, and they can bring it to dean of students, building principals, home, and this way we're all on the same page.
And anybody have another question before I? I don't want to dominate. Anyone else?
Go ahead, go ahead.
Okay. My last question about AP exams, and this Amy might have to chime in here, and we might need a different discussion at a different meeting just about the data. I'm just really interested in, are these offerings, these 7 offerings are only, there are current offerings for AP?
Those are the classes.
These are the
we
classes.
offer. Mhm.
I'm really curious, like over maybe the past 10 years, has our number of offerings gone down? Has it gone up? How? I know
there's
you've
been
been
a
like,
swap of which ones that we've offered. Caroline could speak to the historical piece, but
Mhm.
during my time here, I think ones that had low enrollment and we weren't able to run, we
Right.
swapped with ones, and that enrollment has been really high though. There was an AP in social studies that we're not offering right now, but we had opened an additional section that Ms. Betts is teaching, an AP US she's teaching, and she's teaching AP World. So,
We used to have AP Euro.
Yes.
So that's gone away.
and so it just really depends on enrollment, and I do rely on the counselors to share with us what interest is, based on what that is. So the hardest part for this district, you heard us say it many times, is that our bucket of students is finite. So trying to fill, there's so many choices for them to take and a finite number of periods for them to take them.
right. And I don't know if this is the case, if one AP course is not running one year because of low enrollment, is it offered the next, or is it off?
We try, no, we try to do like AP
Okay.
even, so
Okay.
if we can like flip courses, so
Okay,
every other year we offer a different one kind of thing. It just really depends on when the counselors are meeting with the students in their course selections, what they're asking for.
okay.
And I think there also needs to be a distinction between advanced placement classes, that this is what we're talking about, College Board
Yes.
assessment in May, right?
Yes.
That
Yeah,
is
yes, this is
one
what we're
thing.
talking about. Mhm.
Right, and that is all we're talking
Yeah.
about, but the list of classes that kiddos can take for college credit is
Mhm.
much, much longer. And so over time, I think we've kind of seen a preference towards the college credit bearing classes versus AP classes. Because the college credit bearing classes, you're working the entire time to earn that credit versus either one morning or one afternoon in May, which it's really high stakes, right? They've
It
worked
is.
all year and then they sit for these exams, and some colleges don't take the credit unless you get like a 5 if it's within your
Right.
major. And so, depending on the school, some of them don't take any AP exams, even if you get a 5, right? If it's within your
Exactly.
major. So it's gonna depend, but what we've seen over time is that kids have opted to take the college credit bearing courses through DCC, Marist, Syracuse, Rochester. So, you know, Mount St. Mary's as well. We've just
Right.
expanded this year. So
And did you say, is it 10th grade, a child, 10th or 11th, could start taking those, not,
depends on the class.
right?
It depends on the class. It depends on the school that we're partnered with, what grade level they can take it in.
And how would a student get that list?
It's all through their counselor. When they do their scheduling, they'll learn the availability of courses for the subsequent year. And so that's the decisions that they're making when they're making their schedule.
It's also discussed at the electives fair, of which all the students go to. It's also in the electives fair slideshow that's on the counseling website. It's also emailed home. And it's in the newsletter. So that's how they're trying to make aware of it.
Okay. Are there, I know the regents have boot camps. I'm just curious, are there boot camps for the AP, or has that not really been necessary? Do you find that most students who take these 7 AP courses are getting a 3, 4, or 5, whatever they need to get into college? Or
It
might
has
there,
nothing to do with getting into college.
I'm not getting into college, but where that course would, getting the score they need
To transfer credit.
yes.
Yeah, so, the tough part about AP exams, well, it does help, obviously, your college application process. It has nothing to do with the requirements for, applying. And so we have seen students who have decided to challenge themselves, and maybe do not get the 3, 4, or 5 on the exam. But all the while through, they're doing more rigorous coursework in college level course, offerings. And so I think there are students who want to challenge themselves and would rather get a slightly lower grade working, with that rigor. That's something that they prefer, and we allow them to do that. So I think it's really important to consider what they're in it for, right? If they're in it for the experience, they may not score as well on the exam, and that's okay, right? But they're still getting the experience of doing work at a higher level and hearing conversations with students who are challenging themselves around them. And I think that shows, a certain different kind of tenacity that we also really celebrate. And then there are kiddos who choose to do this, and they do well in the exams and are able to transfer the credit, right? And then there are students who take those AP co-seated classes and opt not to take the AP exam at this point and opt just to get the college credits, right? So there's a whole different host of kids that are taking these classes that are enjoying it for different reasons. Some of them just really like the fact that they're able to experience something at the college level in high school, right? Maybe they have a preference for a subject, and so they want to take it at the highest level we offer.
Thank you. And my last question is for Jack. It's just really quick. The banner presented to Alden at the Renegade.
Correct.
So why just that school, and how did that come about?
Yeah, actually,
Right, all
so,
4 schools have received the distinction.
yeah, thank you.
Right.
So, Project Adam actually reached out to us because they are going to be attending the Hudson Valley Renegades game, and they're gonna be throwing out the first pitch at the day of the field trip, when all the schools, when all the fifth graders go.
Okay.
And so they reached out to us and talked to Mr. Cedarmark and Team 5 to see would they be willing to receive the banner there, probably potentially down on the field, because not to get into the whole story, but the Project Adam, they're going to be throwing out the first pitch at the game. So, and they're gonna be doing a CPR lesson there and kind of getting involved with all the schools. So they reached out to us to see if we would be willing to be the school that receives it at the game, and we're already attending the game. So it's kind of like a
Okay,
easy deal. So
that's wonderful.
really excited for that. Yeah.
That's so great. Thank you.
If it's okay with the rest of the board, I guess, I would have a request if we can get more data on the failings, like breakdown by grade, maybe classes if it's in bulk, what like general factors of why that is and what helped reduce it by such a great percent in Q2. So if that's possible, can you present Q3, if that's okay?
I'll just make sure that before, put the data together, make sure you reviewed it with Caroline. Just, I don't want anybody being able to be identified,
Right.
the student number 23 had this, and this, and suddenly everybody knows who student, we have to make sure that we keep that anonymous. Okay. Or we do an executive.
If you're gonna do that
session.
anyway, Q1 would be great.
Sure. Done.
Okay, thank you.
The other thing we
As
might
well.
wanna do is, because it's come up a couple of times where it's not like misunderstood, but it's what is college credit course versus AP course versus, and like some universities will only accept even if you get the credit, only accept it as liberal arts. They won't, or whatever
Genetic.
the other term is, but.
Yeah.
So maybe at some point, we don't need to do it now, but, at some point, if we could go through, sort of here's the difference between these, here's an example of, a course this is in the AP, and this is a course and the credits they would get, what grades they would need to, just something that, refresh our memories on what these different types of courses are. I think it would be helpful.
Yeah, we have all of that information. I think the tricky part is what individual colleges and universities will accept. That's hard for us to say, but we can say like what the students will earn from Dutchess, where the courses offered through Mount St. Mary's, like we can give you that course credit and information, but we can't tell you that,
Sure.
this particular college is going to accept them and transfer or not. It's gonna depend on the college or university, the student's major, their score, all of those things.
Yeah, there's a term, I remember the engineering courses at Dutchess were not accepted by four-year colleges because they weren't calculus based. So there's a lot of like different twists on this, but I think if we had something that was, at a high level, here's what the kids have in front of them, and here's, sort of the decision they're making. It'd be a good presentation. Maybe in the summer.
Harry, can I just make a quick comment? I'm all for that with the courses and everything. My only comment is that just with passing, failing, stuff like that, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like we're kind of getting into the weeds that's a little beyond what the scope of the board does. I think that should really, I just don't want to see us go down any path where that's not really our job.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think of looking at it from the standpoint of the overall programming or the overall academics is okay. We don't want to start getting into I see math 8. I don't even know if that's a course, but I see math 8 as, the highest level of, we don't want to, that's not our job to get into those weeds. All right, Anything else?
Caroline, I'm sorry, I forgot to ask one more thing regarding AP exams. I know it's not exams, but courses that are offered. I know occasionally one or more than one might not be able to be offered due to low enrollment. And as our enrollment is going down, has the rule, I don't know if it's a rule of thumb or policy for how many have to be enrolled for that course to be offered.
That's not the way that it's worded. It would be brought before the board to approve.
Okay,
I believe it's below 8 off the top of my head.
okay.
There's a policy number. I think it's below 8 and it's reviewed by the board.
And remember that that's also, it's below 8, but there are other, once we review it for things like, you don't want to cancel, I don't know, one of the languages in the 5th year of
Right.
some.
Right.
Okay.
That
Student has
completes the
4
sequence.
years and,
Thank you.
good. All right, thank you, Jack. Was that? All right, superintendent budget presentation.
Right. So you're going to see this evening, what is the product of an iterative process. It is a process that begins much earlier in the school year than I think, people understand. So we start talking about budget pretty much as soon as we enter this school year. We already start talking about plans for next year. And the way that that happens is when we have surprise expenses this year, we are already making a tracking list for what we need to include in the following year. But the official process starts around December, January. And so along the way, we've had multiple conversations in public board meetings about the status of the school's budget from multiple perspectives, one of which is the state aid perspective. And so you may or may not know that the state has issued their, I believe, 5th budget extender. So there will be no state budget until as early as tomorrow, but I'm gonna give you a secret. That's not happening because we got a list today of all of the things that they have not yet even discussed or introduced for discussion. So I would not anticipate seeing a state budget for quite some time.
Did they get their holiday though? That's what I was most worried about.
Yeah, well, we didn't get a holiday,
Sorry.
so I don't know what they did. We did not get one. We have been here working, and so one of the requirements is that we, along the way, share in public board meetings, the state of changing budget development. And so I say changing budget development because, as I mentioned, we start this process really early, right? And so at that time, we have projections that we can make based on figures that we have in front of us, but those projections change. And as the projections change, throughout this process, so then must our expenses and the projected revenues that we're hoping to bring in. And so there's been a lot of discussion throughout time, and we have seen what have been drafts of the budget, given that point in time where we were. And tonight we will see the proposed budget for the board's consideration to adopt. If the board does adopt this version of the budget, that would be what is put to a vote for the public on May 19th. And so we want to just make sure that people understand a little bit of what it takes to get here, because I know that there's lots of bits and pieces that people see early on in the budget process that are concerning. And so there's a lot of conversation around that. And what I would say is, how that might happen when you have bits and pieces of information and not the full story of how we land where we are this evening. And so one of the things that I want to do now is just really talk about the most recent budget progression and how we came to this evening. So on April 7th at the board meeting, there was a draft budget for the 26-27 school year, which included a $1 million deficit that required either piercing the maximum allowable tax cap or recognizing a comparable reduction in projected expenses. So when you understand school budgeting, you understand that it is a zero-based budgeting process. And so that means we build the expenses that it will take to run the school district. And then we look at the revenue package. And at the end, they have to match, right? How much we intend on spending or feel as though we would project to spend has to match how much we will bring in revenue. And the ways in which we bring in revenue, a few little pockets here and there. We do have some rental space right now that BOCES is occupying for a small amount. We bring in state aid. We also bring in, at this point in time, we have BOCES aid that comes back. We have lots of different pieces. But the biggest two would be our state aid package and our levied taxes. And so when we look at that and we look at $1 million budget deficit, the only two ways we can really close that gap is to ask our voters for more money, which is that pierced allowable tax cap, or to be able to cut those expenses to fall within the maximum allowable tax cap calculation. And so on April 14th, the administration and the Board of Education had a public budget workshop here in this room. We explored all the options for expense reductions and possible revenue increases. Additionally, at that same meeting, we had our municipal financial advisor who provided a study of the potential impacts of consolidating the elementary school buildings. And so we went through a pretty thorough explanation of how those things could impact state aid. It could impact the capital project. It could impact the energy performance contract that is a part of the capital project. And so in going through that, the decision was made that while that might be a consideration in the future, there wouldn't be an immediate cost savings that could be applied to this year's budget to realize the relief that we need. And so the board ultimately advised the administration to develop a budget in compliance with the maximum allowable tax cap, and also help to provide some direction on where reductions could be made. And so the budget that's being presented here for your consideration is within the maximum allowable tax cap and fully compliant with that. So that's what you will see this evening. So just to be reminded, the 25-26 budget was $35 million. It is $35,649,651. And the proposed budget for the 26-27 school year is $37,992,751. And so the budget to budget difference is listed there as $2,343,100, or a 6.57% budget to budget increase. So that means that the increase from last year's budget to this year's budget is 6.57%. And then when you look at the tax levy difference of 7.02% is at the maximum allowable tax cap, levying $1,951,101. And so the proposed tax cap for this year for the 26-27 school year funding would be $29,733,237. And that is different than the 25-26 tax levy by that $1.9 million. And so we just wanted to explain to the public that in reaching a budget that is below that tax cap, there were obviously some significant reductions that needed to be made. One of the things that we keep hearing is, why are we not considering administrative cuts to the budget? And so in fact, this budget that is prepared for the 26-27 school year does have 2 less administrators. And that is the third administrative reduction since the 24 school year. So that's actually 30% of the administrative team that has been cut in 3 years. So that's something just to be mindful of. We understand the question, but also recognizing that that is the smallest unit as well. A 30% reduction is a difficult one to sustain. And so along with those reductions, there will be an impact on every unit. So there will be the staffing reductions that are here will be within the CSEA, the MTA, which is our Teachers Association. Non-unit staffs will also be impacted as well. And so some of the positions that are impacted will be listed on the screen here. So there will be monitors positions, teacher aide positions, teaching assistant positions, and 2 teaching positions. And the staffing projections, I do need everyone to understand are subject to change, and that's based on evolving student need and potential attrition. And so we say that because what's actually happening this evening is the Board of Education is adopting a budget number. And so that number is what we are authorized to spend should the public approve this budget. That is what we are authorized to spend in the 26-27 school year. And so that means that if we have students who have specific needs and we're required to hire back staff in some area, that money is going to have to be shifted within the budget. And so not to have anyone have a misunderstanding, but these are the things that we do want the public to know, is that we are voting essentially on a number, on a budget figure. And so in addition to staff reductions, we've also reduced the budget in other areas. So district-wide professional development has been trimmed quite significantly. Again, it's something that we can potentially shrink or do without for a period of time, but it's extremely important, especially as the requirements change in certain subject areas, standards change. The way in which we teach students evolves over time, and so that requires development. And so while we have trimmed this back, there will still be necessary development that we have to do. And so there's, not as much, but some money that remains in the budget to do so. We have worked very closely with Mr. Hamill, who was able to be an awesome team member and recognize areas in which he could potentially save. And so there has been a trim to the athletic budget, though it will not impact the athletic program, greatly. We'll still be able to offer with authorization the majority of the sports that we have this year. Again, it will go back to the same conversations about interest and enrollment and, students who want to participate. So I don't want to say if we offered it this year, we will offer it next year. If we don't have students who want to participate, we will not, right? But at this point in time, we worked just enough where we can manage with supplies and equipment trims for this 1 year. For the Board of Education, I want to be very clear. The Board of Education members are volunteers. They do not get paid. However, there are some contractual expenses that are related to Board of Education. And so that has to do with memberships in like state and national organizations and their attendance at conferences to learn about being a board member. And so that's the place in which some of those trims have been made from that line. And then we did preserve the Summer Scholars Program, but we actually did reduce the length of it. So students will still have the opportunity to learn and to maintain their learning throughout the summer. That's one of the really important pieces with the Summer Scholars Program, is that students are able to hopefully attend, practice their literacy and numeracy, and that is meant to prevent the summer slide, as you will. So it's meant to help students maintain and not regress over the summer with such a long break in their learning. And so the total savings that we were able to recognize from staffing and program reductions is projected to be about $835,000. And so you'll see there that that is not $1 million. And so you're probably wondering, well, where did that come from? Where did the other 164,000 come from? And so that is going to be met with a fund balance appropriation. And so one of the things that we wanted to do and still endeavor to do, as we go forward, is to reduce the amount of fund balance that is appropriated from 1 year to the next, right? So that's not a sustainable model where we are allocating this year's money to next year's expenses, but in order to preserve as much of our programming and staffing as we can, we felt comfortable with appropriating that $164,152 in addition to what was already intended. And so the one thing that I think is really important is that we need to have serious conversations about the expenses of doing business are seriously they're out driving, the ability to bring in revenue, right? Schools by nature are not revenue generating organizations. And so with the state being very unpredictable and somewhat unreliable in the money that we get each year, you know, it does become concerning to continue to rely on our sort of savings account, if you will, from that fund balance conversation. And so we will continue to try and bring that number down over time. But I do think it's really important to also look at the numbers for this coming year. So when we're talking about school district budgeting, we're talking about a tripartite budget is what it's often called. So there's three pieces to that budget, and what it is categories of program, administrative, and capital. And so the program expenses are those that people generally consider to be the most student facing. And so that's where we want the bulk of our money. So if you think of this as a $1 bill, this means that 75% goes directly to students. And then 10 cents on the dollar goes to the administrative cost of doing business, which is not just the cost of administrators, but it's also the cost of payroll, human resources, benefits, data processing, any auditing or legal services, our tax collection, purchasing, and also public information, as well as all the staff salaries that come out of the administrative portion of the budget. And our capital component is about 15 cents on the dollar this year. And so bearing in mind that that also includes any of the buildings and ground staff, any of the materials for custodials and maintenance, the work that they do here, any leasing expenses, any bonds, capital expenses, and we know we have the capital project right now. So all of that being considered, if you look on the next slide, there's a really nice chart that shows you that gray area that is the direct student facing program portion of the budget. And you'll notice one thing that we're really very proud of is that we continue to shrink our administrative portion of the budget year over year. And so we have, once again, the smallest administrative allocation over the past 8 years, which when we took over in these positions, Mr. Garcia and I aimed to bring that number down to 10, and we are just about there. We're at 10.02. So we've done our very best, but 10 is where we would like to hover because we want most of that money going directly to students and to the buildings in which they go to school. And so that is our budget picture for this year. And Mr. Garcia is going to go through and talk a little bit about the expenses and the revenues that offset those expenses for our proposed budget for this year.
So you'll see these charts, they look very similar to the ones we've shown in the past. The numbers have been updated for this particular budget version. Just wanted to highlight the major differences year over year, as you'll see. So the two yellow lines here are special programs and pupil transportation. These are things that get largely dictated to us. As Caroline said earlier, as programs evolve, student needs change, right? Kids need IEPs, they need special programs. We need to have money available to meet those needs under IDEA and all the other legal requirements on which we're subjected to. Then there's busing that happens as a result of that. So there's legal requirements for busing. Our current district policies go above and beyond the legal minimums for transportation services. But again, we are also required to transport non-public students that are currently placed within 15 miles of their home, as well as any special education students or students receiving special services outside of the district. So much of this is dictated for us, and we have to find the money to meet those needs. The interfund transfer at the bottom is a big number, obviously, something that we haven't seen before, right? We haven't done a major capital project in a very long time. It's been over 20 years since the high school was constructed, or just about. That was the last big bond issuance. And so this money here, if you remember from last year in our capital project presentations, we had spoken about having $10 million in the capital reserve, having another $1.5 million in the general fund available, almost $12 million available to put towards this project. So we actually have to move the money to operationalize that cash. And so we have to move almost $1 million into the general fund. So a lot of this is very much an accounting move, and you'll see the offsetting revenue in the tax levy as well for the tax levy piece of those expenses. But it's a big jump because we haven't really had a number in that category to this extent in recent years. And so here's the revenue side. Like Caroline said before, we calculate our expenses, we trim them as best we can, and then we look at what kind of revenues are available to meet the needs of those expenses, and hopefully everything balances out. And so we start right at the top at the real property tax levy. As we said earlier, this tax levy is at the maximum allowable tax cap dictated by the state with the multi-part formula. It is a 7% increase over last year. In addition, we have increased facilities use revenue. So that is most of that is coming from the BOCES rentals that Caroline mentioned earlier. The line directly below that, we always want to give Dr. Watkins a shout out for her work in getting us to be the first or one of the first 2 school districts in Dutchess County to take advantage of the early college access COSER. What this does is this allows us to shift the expenses for the teachers that teach those college credit bearing courses to the BOCES. And then we bill BOCES back for those expenses. And so the bill back is captured here in the 475. When we take into consideration that we still have to pay the teachers, we still have to pay their benefits, we shift this expense to BOCES, charge them back for it, then we get 8 on it. So all said and done, we're going to net over $150,000 in revenue between chargebacks and aids to BOCES. So when you're looking at a budget where jobs are being eliminated in order to balance expenses and revenues, this is saving jobs. And so I'm very grateful to Dr. Watkins and her team for putting this together because it really is helping our budget out in a major way. And there's no delta there because it's a new program for this year. So next year, if that number shifts, you'll see a change in that delta column on the right-hand side. And at the bottom is our fund balance appropriation. Again, as Caroline said, we want to trim that number. We've spoken in previous presentations about how that number started at 375,000 and ballooned all the way up north of 1.8 million in the current fiscal year. And so our goal is to get it down, work our way back towards $1 million or less. And we're making incremental progress to that end. Not the extent of the progress we were hoping for at the beginning of this budget cycle, but when all is said and done, we're still reducing our dependence on last year's money by just over $250,000. So it's definitely movement in the right direction. And hopefully we can reduce our dependence on that because that money is going to run out eventually. Our state aid numbers are what they are, right? We're looking at a total increase of 263,000. But I put a giant asterisk on that because, as we've said in other presentations, the variance of our anticipated to actual state aid package is between $100,000 and $300,000. So our expected increase falls squarely within the expected variance. And so for budgeting purposes, we almost have to anticipate a $0 increase because for the last 4 years, it's been within that variance. And here's, speaking of which, the last couple of years, so you can see 24, 25, 25, 26, and the estimated versus actuals. And you can see that we're within that variance here. We're just over $200,000 in variance between the years. So we're expecting that number to be relatively flat going forward.
Can you just go back for one slide?
Sure.
So I just want to point out a really important footnote there that on average, the annual increase to our state aid has been about $52,000, almost $53,000. And over that same period, we've experienced a recognized rate of inflation of more than 16%. And I say recognized because our inflation rate is dictated to us by the state. I think it's probably fair to say that if you look back in the past 5 years, 16% over 5 years kind of seems low when you think about how much things have increased. And so that's really what we're battling here. We're battling a rate of inflation that is ballooning faster than the aid that we're being provided by New York State. And the cost of everything that we do is going up so significantly. And so, people have asked, how are we in a situation where, we have $1 million of expenses that we can't cover? This is a big part of the story. And also one of the things that we've continued to really talk about is that while the revenues aren't going up, this year alone, we've had over $400,000, almost $500,000 actually, in increases just to our health insurance. Our special education programs are north of $600,000 increased from last year. And also the $16,000 increase in the district's insurance through the New York State Insurance Reciprocal. So these are things that when we're talking about our revenues growing at such a slow rate, it's really problematic when it's measured up against the expenses that are growing out of control.
So again, here's just a snapshot of the last couple of years of state aid that illustrates exactly what Caroline just spoke about in terms of the relative stagnation of our aid package coming from the state. And as a reminder, this represents roughly a quarter of our revenue compared to the 70% of revenue coming from the tax levy. So tax levy and state aid, again, are two largest revenue drivers, and one is capped and the other one is stagnating. We wanted to provide some history. At the previous meetings, we shared some of the history on tax levy growth. So again, this data is an old slide that we've brought back for historical purposes. We weren't here for this for a large part of this period, and so I can't speak to why these things happen, but we can tell you that in years where we did not levy at the maximum, we've had to either pierce the cap or go back to the maximum in the years that followed. And again, as a reminder for the folks in the room and those listening at home, the tax cap is calculated based on the previous year's tax levy. It is a year-to-year calculation. So for every year that we do not levy at the maximum, the money left on the table, for lack of a better term, is not recoverable in any subsequent year. And that deficit will compound over time. And so we wanted to illustrate what that could look like, both in our growth in recent years and what the projected lost revenue has been in the same time period. So you can see the blue line here is exactly what Caroline spoke about in terms of the inflation factor calculation. This is what the state tells us inflation looked like over the past few years. And you can see comparatively what our allowable levy growth has been in the same window in the red line below. On this chart, you'll see the budget is the blue line, the tax levy is the yellow line, and the tax cap is the red line. And for the years where the cap flipped above the levy, which means we did not levy at the maximum, you can see the gap between the blue and red and yellow lines expanding ever so slightly, but opening up as we go forward. And so when we talk about needing to increase our revenues, needing to manage our expenses to the extent possible, I mean, everything that we showed you that was highlighted in yellow are things we can't control, right? And so we're trying to bring those lines closer together in the years to come as best we can, given the resources available to us. So what does it look like when we don't levy at the maximum? Well, we did a little exercise in history. The state archives our previous tax levies. So the numbers that you see on this chart are pulled directly from the Office of the State Controller. So I didn't make them up. I didn't find them in a filing cabinet. We found them in the portal at the OSC. But what you're going to see here is the years that we did not levy the maximum, those lost revenue at the bottom is compounded over time. Based on our calculations, the district has not levied a total of $840,692. The net of the years where we pierced the cap is about $650. But the big number here is that $840 would have compounded to $995,903 in the current school year. And had that money been in the budget, we'd have over $1 million of tax levy flexibility for next year without having to get a supermajority and pierce the maximum allowable tax cap. And so it's unfortunate because there's a lesson here, and it's an unfortunate lesson for school districts, right? If you don't levy at the maximum, you end up potentially hurting yourself in prospective years. And so we never want to overtax our community, but there is a significant financial impact of not levying the taxes at the extent possible. This is where it gets a little more uncomfortable, if that's even possible, but we need to talk about what happens if the budget vote doesn't pass. So there's a lot of words on the screen, but I'm going to boil it down to very simple terms. We are allowed to levy taxes based on the community's authorization to do so. If the community does not authorize us to increase the amount of taxes that we levy in the coming school year, we have to go off of the previous allowable tax levy, which is the current fiscal year, which would be a difference of, again, $1.95 million. So in very simple terms, if the budget vote does not pass and the board opts to go to a contingency budget, we have to reduce our expenses to meet that tax levy. And that means reducing our expenses by another $1.9 million beyond the $800,000 reductions that Caroline spoke about at the beginning of this presentation. What does that look like? Well, there is something called ordinary contingent expenses. We are allowed to keep what they call ordinary contingent expenses in the budget, and anything that is not ordinary and contingent has to come out. The basic criteria for that are all equipment and salary increases for non-union staff. We have designated as a district additional costs that we feel are not ordinary and contingent, things that we don't want to do without, but could do without for 1 year. And after doing all that math, we came up with just under $500,000 worth of cuts. So when we look at the contingent budget, if the budget vote does not pass, and the board tells us we have to create a contingent budget, we will do so, and that budget will require an additional $1.5 million in cuts beyond what's reflected on the screen. And so just to wrap up, we wanted to bring back the budget at a glance once again. We are looking at a 6.57 increase to the budget, a 7.02 increase to the tax levy, and we are just at and within the maximum allowable tax levy cap for the 26-27 school year. We also wanted to add, if anybody has any questions, anybody watching at home, anybody in the room, you can email district.info@millbrookcsd.org. That email address goes to half of us sitting at this table here, and the person that is most qualified and knowledgeable will respond to you as soon as possible. Questions?
Questions? So I think, I'm hoping people understand, the last thing in the world we want to do ever is to cut programs for our kids. That's why we're in business. We went through, and that includes things like sports and music and art. We went through and created, how about a percentage of that instead of the wipe it out that usually comes around. And I think we have, or they have done a very good job of getting it to the point where it doesn't pierce the cap. It makes that uncomfortable position sort of out of question, but it maintains the majority of our programs. There's still a lot of variability that we have to carry in here as well. If there's a sudden influx of special ed students or people with special need or whatever, that's money that, but the state or the law says we have to cover. Whether or not the state will and when get their act together and tell us how much state aid we can expect is another variability that we carry. But we'll deal with those as they come throughout the year. But I think we're at a point where we've got a budget or a proposed budget of keeping everything that we, that's critical up and running. So, anything else? All right, do we have any, I think the next thing is the public comment, if I could read.
None online, but I don't know if anyone here would like to see.
None online. Any questions or comments? Just if you could introduce yourself and that way we know who you are.
Sure. I'm Emma Miller. I'm part of the PTO and a parent to a pre-K kid. That chart that you had with I believe it was the budget and the tax levy and the tax cap. So you're proposing levying at that cap, right?
Yes.
So is there a long-term plan to try to close that a little bit more? Because my understanding was piercing the tax cap would close it quite a bit. But we're not doing that, understandably. So is there a long-term plan to try to reduce that so that we're not in this situation next year, or is this budget going to help us next year?
I can start if you want. So I think part of the story here is that at some point, without significant reductions to program, we are going to have to pierce the cap. The expenses are completely outdriving our ability to bring in revenue. This is not something that is foreign at this point. If you look around New York State, there's many districts who are in the same situation. And I think that there's a call to repeal the tax cap. And I understand the reluctance on the part of the lawmakers to not do that completely, but I think that they need to be realistic and create some exclusions to the tax cap, because the reality is expenses being what they are in terms of health insurance, right now. Health insurance alone, right? It's crippling districts around New York State. Special education expenses, the expenses related to many of the students who require special programming, whether it's our English language learners, students who are migrant students even carry a cost associated with them. And currently, the people needs index that we are permitted to put within our budget and the calculation it's not matching the cost of educating those populations. And so there needs to be a realistic overhaul. Part of what's really problematic right now is that the state's budget is supposed to be adopted by April 1st, and that is supposed to help inform school district budgeting. Yes, that. And so many of those considerations are on the table, right? And so either the governor or the One House budget may have mentioned increases to the People's Needs Index formula, right? So having a multiplier, if you will, for a student who requires special programming. So rather than counting that student as 1, they might count them as 1.4 or 1.6 in terms of our aid package. But not having any of that set, we have to be extremely conservative, right? What we do absolutely know as a fact is our expenses are outdriving our ability to, raise funds. And so at some point, without a significant overhaul in the way that the state funds education, we are going to need to pierce the cap because, as you said, right, when you look just at the $918,000, that's the additional taxes that we would be able to levy within the tax cap had we never left money on the table, right? We would currently be sitting on $955,000 more this year. And because it's budget to budget, levy to levy that we would be calculating, we would be able to levy an additional $918,000. And with $1 million deficit, right, we would be right where we need to be, right? We could find $80,000. But to be able to find $1 million and I get it, we're preserving programs and I'm really proud of that. But as a superintendent and leader, to have to even put for consideration staff on the table feels horrible. And so this is the reality of where we are right now, but there is going to have to be change in the future because we want to preserve the very best for our kiddos here.
The only thing I can add to that is operationally, we're looking at return on investment in everything, every dollar we spend outside of the classroom. So with every possible, whether it's an augmentation, whether it's a replacement, it's how long is this going to last? Will we be able to fund its replacement 5 years from now? So replacement cycles in general have been very important to us. Some of the questions we've got from the public, are we shopping around health insurance? We are members of the committee for the region that determines health insurance packages. We're on subcommittees to find more cost-effective packages. We, on this side of the table, are actively lobbying constantly. Caroline leads lobbying efforts in the Hudson Valley for the superintendents, and we've met with over half a dozen lawmakers this budget cycle alone. So we're doing everything we can outside of the variables we can't control.
And I think we should also mention too, we are looking at ways to generate revenue.
Yes.
So we've had conversations with specifically our BOCES and other school districts as we're looking at pre-K eventually potentially becoming a mandate. So just that thought alone, and I love the idea. This is a decision that Millbrook made before it was even something for state consideration. I love having our youngest learners in the buildings with us for so many reasons. And it's also a wonderful opportunity for those kiddos to learn how to be students, right? But we've had conversations with other school districts like, hey, if you don't have the space, we do. So send us some of your kiddos and we'll educate them here, right? As a way to generate revenue. We've had conversations with BOCES about, just so you are aware, they could create an entire new school just based on the kindergarten referrals that they have this year. And so being able to say, if you have some students who are appropriate to be educated within a self-contained program in a public school, we'll find a room for you, send them over. So we currently do have one BOCES room and one ancillary space down at Elm Drive. We're looking to potentially expand that and possibly bring in programming in another building in the district as well. Other BOCES programming. So one of the things is that all of this is contingent on the potential, right? And if BOCES approves that within their budget, it could be a way to change the landscape a little bit for next year. So we're doing everything that we can to find, and like Elliot said, to lobby for more funds. But, you know, we'll continue to be creative, but at some point we're going to need more assistance. Thank you.
Matthew Paquet, president of the PTO. My daughter is at Alden in 3rd grade. First, I just want to commend you guys for your efforts. I really think that you were tasked with a very difficult challenge. You know, and you know, despite what, you know, Superintendent Vidal said about, you know, not wanting to have staff cuts, I mean, it's the reality of, you know, the world with regards to putting your best foot forward and providing opportunities and services for your students without significant interruption. And while, you know, paring down or reducing, you know, student to teacher or student to staff ratios will change things, you know, somewhat. I think it's important to emphasize a lot of the other things that you guys were able to salvage or avoid having to cut, that are going to keep day-to-day life and activities for our students, you know, the norm, which is not eliminating all sports, not eliminating the fine arts, the music program, the art programs, the transportation, which was on the block, you know, where, you know, you may have had a situation where by making that cut, a lot of students would have been and families would have been in a difficult situation because they were no longer going to be able to get their students, or they were going to have to figure out how to get their children to and from school. So at the end of the day, when I look at this, and, you know, yeah, it hurts and it stings to lose some, you know, valued members of our community who are staff here. You know, I think that you guys did a fantastic job, and I really hope that, you know, this budget moves forward and we don't have to, you know, come back and have to look at, you know, what the next $1.5 million in cuts are going to be if we have to go to contingency. I think it's important that we get that message out there just as much as, you know, the message here, which is what are we losing, which is some things, but what were we able to salvage and what were we able to gain or keep.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm Graham Newhall. I have 2 children. I have a pre-K and a 3rd grader. I also commend you for this budget, which seems like it's extremely thoughtful given the other possibilities, which are much more dire. And just for the record, I'm deeply sympathetic for the fact that you guys are not in control of all these costs. The healthcare costs, as you say, Caroline, are not just affecting our district. It's not just our state. It's I've read some story the other day about Boston having to make very difficult decisions. A lot of them driven by healthcare costs, which, to your point, it's not as if there are just other magical plans out there we can just go grab. I would be on those as well. So I just need to say out loud that I am very aware, and I wish other people were, that there are things in this budget that the main cost drivers are not because of decisions that you have made. And I think the most complaints I get from people that I hear about, even from last year in the capital campaign, often focused on those things. And I understand why people don't understand that, but I do think it's worth saying again and again and again that you are required to be offering these things that are cost drivers for the district. And we like to have this, we want to teach healthcare, we want to be able to provide transportation to students who need that. And it's unfortunate that that's what's driving the cost. I wish the state would have a different perspective, as you say. We tie cost of living increases to other parts of our lives. Why is there not an inflation tracker or however else to tie school budgeting to sort of macroeconomic environment, which would be much fairer, not to be sitting here every year pinching and finding corners to pull other dollars from or cut things off, because it's down to us in this room when it could be a different calculation at the state level, certainly at the national level and other considerations. So again, I echo what he just said about commending you guys for finding the way out, hopefully, but tough situation. But one last question for Elliot, though. From your chart of when we were not piercing the cap, when was the last year we did pierce the cap? It was a while ago.
It was a while back.
Does that require a supermajority?
Yes.
60 plus 1.
60%.
They're not super important. I think it's been a while.
I think it was 2014.
Yeah, it was 2014,
Okay.
15, about 10 years ago.
Okay. 60 plus 1. Okay.
And just to, I mean, if things keep going the way they're going, this is not a Millbrook issue. This is not a Pine Plain, well, it is, because it's all of our issues. Something is gonna have to change at the state level in the way that they support local school districts. Because right now, there seems to be, if you look upstate New York, they're really struggling with populations and struggling with the number of school districts, and things are gonna have to be studied and not at the pace of politics, but at the pace of, like, we need it done now. The tax cap, when it originally came out, seemed like a good idea, at least, you know, just listening to it back then. But it's one of those things that they've just set in stone now, and it never changes. Here's the calculation. Well, what about all these things that are going up at an exponential rate? Yeah, but stay with it, because if we comment on the tax cap, the state feels that, like, the school districts are basically, they want to get rid of it. No one has ever said, get rid of the tax cap.
Not
I
no
mean,
one.
yeah.
Not no
Well,
one.
Not more than one. But there's just changes that need to be made. There's changes that can be made in the way we're allowed to budget things that can help these situations. It's one of those things that's a much bigger issue than just trying to get through the current year's budget. And, you know, it's gonna take a fight. And we have, I mean, Dutchess County School Board Association's been sending letters to the governor and, you know, and meeting with legislators, and so far it's still a struggle. But we keep on it.
Yeah, and I think it's just important for folks to know that part of this work, right? Part of it is what we're handed by the state, and part of it is what we do with the opportunities that we have. And so I have right here a packet from the New York State Educational Conference Board. And so that is a partnership between ASBO, which is the School Business Officials, their association, the Association of the Big Five School Districts, the Council of School Superintendents, which I sit on the Legislative Advocacy Board, New York State PTI, the School Boards Association, New York State United Teachers, and then also CNES, which is the administrative, that is their organization at the state level. And so this speaks a lot about different issues that we are facing in education. You guys can go if you want, it's getting up to you. And so these are some issues that we're facing in education, the first and foremost being the untimely state budget, right? And so it goes through how we're required to adopt a budget for consideration. Tonight is the deadline to do that. And then it goes through like the dates for military ballots to be sent out, the dates when we have to issue our property tax report card, no flexibility to those dates, but the April 1st deadline for the state has come and gone, right? And so it's talking in as well about push in certain areas. So other things that maybe don't go vocalized as much, but some things to also just be aware of how many factors are working against school districts. 2021 is the last time that they provided funding for the prior year state aid claims. So if a school district has a complaint or a discrepancy in the amount of aid that they were due in a prior year, they used to be able to issue a claim for that and get it paid in the following year. So that hasn't happened since 2021, and there's $327 million estimated that is owed to school districts from the state. That just haven't been paid, right? And so these are things that the Education Conference Board is pushing, like, hey, start paying those again. And by the way, if you could pay them in the following school year, that'd be really great because our schools need them. Zero emissions bus mandates, for those of you who don't know, the state is requiring that any buses purchased after or during the 2027 school year, and going forward be electric vehicles. And so they're pushing for that to be extended, that timeline to be extended. And so a lot of the advocacy that we have been doing through the Lower Hudson Education Coalition, which I'm a steering member, and the Lower Hudson Council of School Superintendents is aligned with that. Like, hey, we recognize that this is environmentally friendly and a great goal to have, but let's be realistic about this. We actually don't have the infrastructure to do this, and the utility companies have said that. So there's that. There's also what I had mentioned before for the funding of special the student groups for special funding, so students with special needs. One of the things that folks in the audience, anyone who's listening at home, may not understand, that the state actually they passed a law that students need to be educated until their 22nd birthday. So up until this school year, the day that the student turns 21, the end of that school year is when they were typically exited from K-12 education. And now that was extended until the night before their 22nd birthday. However, that gap between 21 and 22 is no longer funded. There is no provision in law to provide funding for school districts. So any student that you have from their 21st birthday, or from the time they turn 21 until their 22nd birthday, is not funded, right? And so these mandates that happen cost school districts money. And so it's estimated that that is going to, with the addition of the share of residential programming. So if you have a student in a residential setting because of their individual needs, the cost of that was shifted a couple years ago back onto school districts. So it was with the state, a portion of that, and the full funding of that has been shifted back onto school districts. So these are things that are happening over time that one by one school districts can absorb, but when they're all compounded on top of one another, it becomes this insurmountable funding crisis, really, that school districts are facing. So that special education funding stall, I guess, it's not a cut, it's just things they never funded and don't plan on. They estimate outside of New York City is $15 million. And so there's a call, like Perry had said, about, what are we doing with this aid formula? So one of the things I think is really interesting is that at some point along the way, the foundation aid formula has been recognized to not actually fit the needs of 80% of the school districts in New York State. And so if your funding calculation doesn't serve 80% of the school districts in your state, it's time to look back at that, right? And so the Lower Hudson Education Coalition and the Lower Hudson Council of School Superintendents have gone to one of the biggest advocates for education is Shelley Mayer, who's the Senate Education Committee Chair, and asked, like, please, the Rockefeller Institute, who just did this major foundation aid study and said, hey, we have some ideas of what you could do. And the state said, great, thanks. Like, can we get them to start talking about what those ideas look like? Because something needs to change here. And so, along with everything that we're doing here, we're also, I know with the organizations that Elliot and Amy, that they belong to, they're doing this work. We're doing this work on a state level to say, it's not just Millbrook, like this has to change for all kids everywhere. And so we will keep doing that, and we will keep providing updates to the community about what we're doing to help the situation, in addition to just locally here.
And just one last comment. So what we're doing here tonight is, we've for months been reviewing budget changes. And we've gotten to a point where there's a proposed budget from the administration to the Board of Ed saying, this is what we think we should take forward. Board of Ed will vote on, is that what we want to put out to the public as, as our proposed budget? What we really need is on May 19th, everybody to come out and vote. We don't say, please vote yes, please vote no. We say, please vote. We need to hear from everybody, parents, senior citizens, everyone within the district. What's your position? What's your thought on this budget? So please, May 19th, please come out and vote. Anything? Guys have questions, concerns?
I mean, the one thing I would say is if you do have questions, reach out to the district. I know it can get a little squirrely on social media and the rumors can run wild pretty quick. So if you have questions or you want to confirm something, reach out to the district and get the straight answers.
Okay.
Can I also throw one quick thing on there? As a taxpayer and parent, I did a quick, like a Google AI on how to write a letter to the governor, about funding, and it gives you this whole template if anyone wants to do that, and send a letter. And I don't know if it'll do anything, but, sometimes the squeaky wheel.
Thanks, Jen. Okay. Anything new from people in the public?
No.
Nothing? Okay, thank you. All right, next, financials and warrants. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Okay. The next one is the notice of request of support of public school state sports championship tournaments to NICEAD. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Questions, comments? Is there anything you guys wanted to say?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to just provide some context for this. So part of the work that we do, as I said, is in the area of advocacy. So we've brought forth in the last couple of months different resolutions to advocate for not just financial, but also for the betterment of student programming. So a couple of meetings ago, you had a resolution to be able to add health insurance reserves as one of the allowable reserves. So that means saving money outside of our regular funds balance so that if we get hit with a health insurance increase like we did this year, we would be somewhat insulated because we would have money in savings. This particular one is about public school sports and how public schools are facing teams from non-public schools who have a wider geographic area that they're able to student athletes from. And so this is just, it has nothing to do with funding necessarily, but it has everything to do with the opportunities that our students are able to benefit from.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? All right, next is motion for request in support of petition of Lower Hudson Education Coalition. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second?
Second.
Comments, questions? You wanna?
Yeah, so this is actually, we wrote a letter as an administration in support of the Lower Hudson Education Coalition's petition that they filed with the Public Service Commission to be able to have a dedicated informational proceeding that is related to the EV buses. Basically to have the utility companies studied to have it be public knowledge. Even though they've said it publicly, somehow the people who are in position to make these laws aren't hearing the part where the utility companies are saying we don't have the infrastructure for this and will not be ready. And so this is the Lower Hudson Education Coalition. This is our way of saying we're going to make you say it publicly. So that's what we're pushing for. And so individual school districts were asked to write their letters in support of it. And so this is a resolution that will then be sent to the lawmakers that are listed.
Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? All right, next is proposition 1 for the annual meeting. Do I have a motion? So moved. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Comments, questions? Make any last minute? Questions, comments? All in favor? Aye. Any against? And last is the approve the property tax report card. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Questions, comments? All in favor?
Hi.
Aye. Any against? All right, next is the enrollment report. Just for your information. Any questions on it? All right, future agenda items, as I said before, if you could just take a look through that file again, make sure you understand what's in there. And if there's anything that has specific interest in moving up, let Cheryl know. Right, next is proposed executive session. Just to make sure everybody's aware, we go to executive session normally to talk about specific employees or terms of their employment. However, any motion that we take has to be done in open session. So when we return from executive session, we may take actions that results from executive session. So with that, do I have a motion to go to executive session? Do I have a second?
Also.
In favor?